And now here is the second part of my interview with award-winning journalist Robert Scheer. Hi, this is Niswander of the Now Man show, and I'm here with a journalist, Robert Scheer, who is also the editor-in-chief of the online magazine Truth Dig, as well as the host of the weekly podcast on KCRW-FM, which is called the Scheer Intelligence. Professor Scheer, thank you for being on the Now Man show. We are in an election season right now, and we have two of the most unfavorable candidates, I think, in the history of our country. So what do you think a Clinton or a Trump presidency would look like?
Well, when you say unfavorable, you mean they're evaluated by the public.
Yeah, by the public, yeah.
And I think there's something to be said about that. We know why a lot of people would have an unfavorable view of Trump. Mm-hmm. He's been a demagogue. I've called him a neo-fascist in his scapegoating of immigrants, of the vulnerable, blaming all our problems not on Wall Street, not on the rich and powerful, of which he is certainly a key member, but blaming it on people coming over here to try to make a living to feed their families and so forth. So that's very dangerous, demagogue. I don't want to minimize it. But Donald Trump didn't get the country into the big mess. He's just another financial pirate, not a particularly important one. He didn't run Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
He didn't run Citigroup. He didn't run, the U.S. Congress. He wasn't president of the United States when Bill Clinton signed off on the Financial Service Modernization Act, the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, that made all these financial swindles legal.
Like derivatives?
All the collateralized debt obligations,
yeah.
Credit default swaps, all of that was made legal in a bipartisan, Republican-led Senate working with the Democrat Bill Clinton, and the worst one he signed off when he was a lame duck president. So, and Hillary Clinton knows all that.
And you mean Glass-Steagall's what you're referring to?
No, Glass-Steagall's the Financial Service Modernization Act. That was 2 years before, but when he's a lame duck president after the 2000 election, he signs off on the commodity futures, which is actually worse because Title III of the Commodity Futures Modernization Act said that none of these new financial devices, which were all hokum if the mafia did it, they'd throw them in the slammer forever.
Yeah.
And none of that will be regulated by any existing law or any regulatory agency. The fact that people don't know that, Title III of the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, signed by Bill Clinton, tells you where the mass media has been all these years. It's just unbelievable.
And then 8 years later, we can see the banks led us directly into the crisis.
Well, because they were empowered to write these, take different mortgages and package them together and put a new label on and swindle people. I mean, it's just incredible.
It was amazing.
Yeah, and then a lot of us, myself, supported Barack Obama. He came in. And he did the same thing George W. Bush did. George W. Bush did not create the financial crisis. He created a large part of the international crisis.
Right,
with his invasion
foreign policy.
of Iraq. And, but in terms of Wall Street, and in my book, The Great American Stickup, I document this quite nicely, and there's a scene that from Paulson, his Treasury Secretary, who had been head of Goldman Sachs, comes into the office, and Bush asked Paulson, he said, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And Paulson, the great Wall Street veteran, looks at the president and he says to himself, this is in his own book, he says it's a tough question to be asked because we did it, meaning Wall Street in cooperation with the federal government. And so Bush comes in, and what does he do? He bails out Wall Street, screws Main Street. Well, Barack Obama does the same thing, hires the same bandits that worked for Clinton, Lawrence Summers, who had worked for Robert Rubin, who had gone off to Citigroup, a bank made legal by...
You talked to those two at the Democrat National Convention, didn't you?
Well, not Rubin, I talked to Summers. I tried to talk to him.
Yeah.
So arrogant, he didn't have to talk to anybody, he's... right, he got 6, even before Obama brought him into the administration again, and he'd been Treasury and everything, he was making $6 million a year from D. Shaw, one of the big hedge funds. I mean, he was making money like crazy.
Wasn't he chief economist for the World Bank too?
Well, yes, but I mean, while he was advising Obama in that campaign in 2008, he was already making all this money from Wall Street. And these people have no shame. And so getting back to your original question about the unfavorability unfavorable ratings of these both candidates, it's justified. It's justified. People should be very suspicious of Hillary Clinton, who tells us her emails have to be kept private on her private server, but she'll call Edward Snowden a traitor for telling us that the government has been spying on our email.
Yeah.
You know, she
Right.
knows and wants to keep her
Right.
email, but if Snowden tells us, hey, the NSA is doing that to everybody else, including the leader of Germany and Brazil and everywhere else, oh, no, that's a crime. He's got to come back and face the music. The same thing your congressman here in Pasadena, Adam Schiff, you know, considers Snowden a traitor, but, oh, no, but Hillary Clinton, of course, had to keep her email safe. He's not going to go after her. And he, top-ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, doesn't tell us anything about what the NSA and the CIA have been doing, whether it's about torture, whether it's about, you know, spying on all of our information. And he's a Democrat. So he's supposed to be something of a liberal Democrat here in liberal Pasadena. So what does that tell you about how the system works? Yes, he can say, Trump, oh, he's really evil. Well, why aren't you evil, you know, fella?
Right. What
Well,
is,
you know,
isn't lesser of two evils still evil?
No, well, then it's an interesting question. We don't have a lot of time, so let me just tell you one really important thing.
Yes.
Or raise a question. Does the danger come from the demagogue who's most extreme, or the demagogue who's most, I say Democrat, but the demagogue who's most effective in misleading us? Because you got all kinds of people walking down the street here who say loony, crazy, wild things. Now, admittedly, it's pretty scary when one of them is running for president like Donald Trump.
Right.
But isn't the greater danger from an establishment that can speak in very nuanced terms and sophisticated and, you know, not use wild language, but what they're actually defending are irrational policies?
Yes.
You know? I mean, Hillary Clinton still defends regime change.
Yes.
She still defends. She said, well, my vote might have been wrong and we got bad information, but she still defends the Iraq War. And she certainly defends going into Libya, and she certainly defends messing up Syria and deciding you're going to back another, just like we did. It was Jimmy Carter, by the way. I have a lot of respect for Jimmy Carter as an ex-president, you know. But the fact
you did the interview that was published in Playboy magazine.
I did the interview, and that's a different issue anyway. You know, you should know this because you're the son of a minister, and Jimmy Carter was somebody who got into trouble with more liberal people at first because he was wearing his religion on his sleeve, that. So yes, I did the Playboy interview, and he explained actually quite intelligently why he was religious, and then, you know, he admitted he was an ordinary human being and he's struggling against the devil in himself and lust. But that was not the important thing in that interview. The important warning in that interview is I was pushing him about, look, you're pretty hawkish, Jimmy Carter. Are you going to get us into wars like Vietnam? And he said in that Playboy interview, check it out, he said, no, because I would never lie to the American people the way Lyndon Johnson did.
Wow.
A Democrat. And then I happened to be on the airplane as a press person with Jimmy Carter when we landed in Dallas, and he was supposed to meet with Lady Bird Johnson, and the interview had just come out, and she wouldn't meet with him because he had insulted her husband, but he was right.
Yes.
You know, so Democrats have lied to the American people sometimes more effectively than Republicans, you know, and that's what we had in this whole mess in Syria and the overthrow of Gaddafi in Libya. And if you read Hillary Clinton's memoir, she boasts of the fact that she was pushing Obama to a more hawkish stance, you know. And then you got Madeleine Albright, one of the worst hawks we've had in government, again, because she was so effective in selling what should not be sold. That's my test of a dangerous demagogue. It's not how loony they sound, because if they're really loony, you can kind of check them out. It's when they've got a message that's effective. Hitler, who went from being a loony to effective, was effective because German economy was in a mess. People were looking for scapegoats. They were looking for explanation, and that guy can sell this garbage, you know? Well, right now, we got a country that's messed up. People know we've been in wars that do not make us safer. We've stoked this whole Muslim terrorism enemy in a totally irrational, crazy way. And we have an economy that sucks and does not give, you know, has growing income inequality and does not give. So then the question is, okay, I could sit here all day long and blast Donald Trump, but who's pointing out that it was Hillary Clinton who defended the end of welfare the main federal anti-poverty when her husband was president. I know, I interviewed him back then before he became president when he was governor of Arkansas, and she defended so-called welfare reform, which turned out to be a phony. And he presided over the concentration of the economy with media ownership, communications.
Telecommunications Act of 1996.
Yeah. And you can go right down
Omnibus
the list.
crime bill.
Right. And so
NAFTA even.
And then, so here's Hillary Clinton saying, yeah, that guy Trump, he's really dangerous. But, where were you, Hillary Clinton, when your party went along with torture? When you're...
Where was the outrage?
Yeah, and where was the truth about, if we talk about Snowden, we talk about the surveillance state, we talk about Chelsea Manning being in jail, and every other, Sperling in jail, all these people in jail, they were put in jail by Democrats more effectively than Republicans.
Yeah.
Barack Obama jailed more people for telling the truth than George Bush did. So what John Kiriakou, a CIA guy for 12 years, and try to make this country safer without torture. Tells us something about torture. He goes and serves 2.5 years in prison. So the Democrats have waged very effective war against truth tellers and to silence opposition. And they do it maybe more effectively than some outrageous Republican like Dick Cheney or Donald Trump who scare us.
And in the economic policy, there's no discussion at all about government creating jobs programs.
What happened? It's very sad.
The environmental policy is incomplete.
Let me try to wrap this up in a way that is not going to make you happier. But we have some very important bright moments in our history. We had abolitionists.
Yes.
We had Tom Paine before that.
Yes.
We had people who would tell us the truth and would work for progress. We had Martin Luther King, who, by the way, if everybody forgets, because now Martin Luther King is a cold statue in Washington, but I published Martin Luther King in Ramparts magazine. I knew Martin Luther King, and I was in the South during some of the civil rights stuff. I was just one obviously of many, many people. But everybody forgets Martin Luther King's speech at Riverside Church in New York, where he said, how do I tell a young kid in the ghetto to shun violence when my government is the major purveyor of violence in the world today? Martin Luther King. Okay, he was talking about the massive bombing, carpet bombing in Vietnam, and he based it, by the way, on reading Ramparts magazine and an article we had about those atrocities. And so let's not forget, that the good people, so-called, the lesser evil people, have created a lot of evil in this world.
Yes.
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not worried about Trump being president. It is pretty frightening. But how do we get to this place where people would consider it? You know why? Because the Republicans, first of all, discredited themselves. They sold the people on a bunch of hokum about religious values and, the new religious right. At the same time, they were stealing money from them. Okay? Finally, people wake up and say, hey, we've had it with the Bushes, and we've had it with all these folks. At least this guy Trump is saying, we got to get some better trade deals, and we got to worry about jobs and paying people. So they're upset. They're worried. And they've lost their houses. They've a lot of hurt, a lot of pain out there.
That's right.
Well, what did the Democrats do? They had a great candidate in Bernie Sanders, great candidate.
Yes.
And Bernie Sanders comes along and is one of the great truth tellers of American history.
I agree.
Lays it out there. And I was at the Democratic Convention.
Yes,
that
you
was
were.
a religious revival for the military-industrial complex.
Wasn't it a job fair too?
Well, it's definitely a job fair. I mean, everybody's looking for their angle. But really, they buried Bernie. They buried Bernie, and they buried the message. And you had one hawk after another. Panetta, who condoned torture, concealed torture, gets a big standing ovation there and applause. Madeleine Albright, all these people, and Bernie Sanders is just pushed out off the side.
And the supporters were there, the delegates were there to raise the issues.
And the fat cats. The rich that ripped off the people, hey, okay, this is the most disturbing thing about the last couple of elections. The Democrats, they love to bring up Citizens United and the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And they were going to make this a big issue if it was Jeb Bush running or something, okay?
Yeah.
You don't hear that much about Citizens United. Why? because when Barack Obama was running, against John McCain, right? Barack Obama, McCain still took public funding. And it was Barack Obama who went to Wall Street and took private funding, did not do public funding. And what do you got now in this election? Yeah, Trump's out there, he's got his own money, he's raising some money, but who is the great fundraiser for Wall Street? Who's backed by Wall Street? It's Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And now these people are not fools. They know that with Hillary Clinton, they're going to get a more effective protection for their piracy than they're going to get with Donald Trump. Donald Trump gets in and everybody's going to say, wait a minute, what is this guy going to do? Is he going to be the bandit? Is he going to, do worse? So maybe we'll get some checks and balances, or maybe we'll, even on the nuclear question, maybe we'll say, hey, the President of the United States should not have the power to wipe out the rest of the world.
So,
right?
so with all the institutional failure that's really going on, how can we leave the audience with a hopeful message going forward? What do you think the movement that Bernie Sanders helped inspire, what can we all do together going forward?
The important thing is to never surrender. As Ralph Nader has said this very clearly, a much maligned, one of the greatest American political public citizens we've ever had, Ralph Nader. Going
I
back
agree.
to, we're talking about auto safety and everything. But here's, Ralph Nader said, don't ever give up your right to vote for an independent candidate, for a Jill Stein, or if you like the libertarian candidate, don't ever let anybody tell you they own your vote, or you got to vote for the lesser evil. You got to vote for evil. What is the lesson there? First of all, there's nothing about the two-party system in the American Constitution, in our experiment. This whole idea would be so offensive to the people who wrote our Constitution, all of them. This whole idea, faction, party, it's the thing that they were most afraid of, people gathering in these little things, and all the money coming in and the corruption of the American process. And I tell people, don't let fear control you. As Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And these people are fear mongers, whether they call themselves Democrats or Republicans. They want to get us afraid of every Muslim in the world. They want to get afraid of everybody in the world who might disagree with us. They want to get us afraid of every member of the other party and deny us choice. And they've got the money to package this message and brainwash everybody. It's incredibly dangerous. Optimism comes from only one source. At the end of the day, as we've been told, you can't fool everybody all the time. There have to be results. People know they're hurting. They know real income is not increasing.
Yes.
They know they're being left out. They know that 25 people have more money than the bottom, 70% or something.
Right.
These statistics that Bernie Sanders was coming out have held up. They're accurate.
Oxfam, they're out there.
Yeah, whether Paul Krugman of the New York Times wants to admit it, or other, people that we once respected and thought would tell us the truth. No, they're rallying around Hillary and they're saying, oh, no, don't bring that up, don't bring that up. Yeah, bring it up. Yeah, bring it up. Those are lousy trade agreements, we should be against them. Those are wars that make no sense, we should be against them. Torture is an evil, evil thing, we should be against it. I don't care what party is pushing any of this stuff. Drone attacks, where you just kill people at a wedding because you think you have the right to. Forget about trial, forget about due process. You're God now. You just fire from the heavens, and kill anybody who's gathering because one of their cousins might have known somebody else who might have been somebody you said was on some terrorism. And then the fact, I want to lay on one solid point here. The fact is, none of the surveillance, I wrote a book called They Know Everything About You, The Surveillance State, what Snowden warned about. Not one single example has been that they've been able to come up with where spying on all of us, gathering this haystack of information, has made us safer. Every single time, whether it was the Boston bombing or the most recent attacks in New York City, New
Jersey.
New Jersey and New York, every one of them, they knew these people.
Yeah.
They were on their watch list. They had a history. They'd gone to Afghanistan. They'd gotten training. They were in Chechnya or someplace. They knew all this stuff. So here's this guy, his father who's frying chicken down here in New Jersey, tells the government, tells the FBI, my son has really quite dangerous ideas, and they ignore it. They're spying on every one of us all the time, including Angela Merkel, the head of Germany, but somehow they can't follow this one guy, right, whose father tells the FBI, hey, this guy's getting a little whacked out. He's been to Afghanistan, and this is somebody you should worry about. So, the fact of the matter is they don't make us safer. They scare us into surrendering our freedoms. They scare us into accepting incompetency on their part and torture and a violation of everything that this country is supposed to believe in. And it's garbage to think that we need them in any way to protect them. We need to challenge them. It's our right to challenge them and not be frightened because they find somebody who would be even worse to come along. They're always going to find somebody who's going to be even worse. But if that's the choice, you're finished.
We'll leave it on that. And Bernie Sanders would end his speeches during his campaign tour with saying things like, when we're together, there's nothing we can't do. I think that would be a good way to leave it.
No, when we're together and Lawrence Ferlinghetti once said, keep an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out.
I like that.
Okay?
That's really good.
So being together like sheep, that doesn't cut it.
Yeah.
Being together by people who are questioning and thinking critically and raising questions and not afraid, that's something else. That's called democracy.
We'll leave it on that. Professor Scheer, thank you very much for being on the Now Man Show. This is Niswander, and you've been watching the Now Man Show.